on the end.
Between this daylight savings time and I hope I'm here.
You tell him we don't need stuff there from the phone.
I should look at the window. I don't have anything.
Oh, okay. Wait for another one.
You gotta collect them.
Are you more comfortable on a chair or on the sofa? How are you?
Well,
Everything moving along? I wish I didn't. I wish my phone was here.
yeah.
I hated my living room.
That's good, that's good.
Done by hand, but I don't know. I'm done by.
Good morning. Good morning. So there's a handout. You know, you should always number the pages of the handout. So I'm just warning you, if you get them backwards, you're really in trouble because they're front and back. The way they're laying there, they go from the far side to the, if you keep them stacked, you'll be fine, front and back. But if you get them out of order, I'm not trying to help you, I can't. All right, a couple things I want to say to you today, just full disclosure. If you're nervous about what you might, you should be aware that we are live broadcasting. People that wanted to be here for the class and couldn't be, and so right behind you, Karen, right over your little there is the listening eye and ear. And none of you are on the camera, so you can comment and talk and whatever, but unless you identify yourself, no one will know who you are. And I'm just saying, because some people are very, no matter what, they're nervous about that. Okay, let's begin with a prayer. Gracious God, thank you for your love for us and for the world. We thank you for the variety of ways that you have made endeavor to explain that love to us and to make it real. We thank you for those that have brought that love to us and have made that love real. And for the chance here to explore the meanings of your life with us and our life with you and our life together. Bless us with your grace, binding us together and drawing us ever forward. In Jesus' name, amen. So the topic today is a little bit ambitious, I'm going to be honest with you. But what does the Bible have to say about homosexuality? And to start off with, like I tried to give you, in the class, I'll try to give you something that when you go home, you can read more about it, and you can go back and you can read it. I think of the class as a way for me to sort of make the presentation and give you a chance to converse with it, to talk about it, to say, gee, I didn't really ever think about it that way, or I'm not sure that's the right way to think about it. So I want to start by saying that if the topic is, what does the Bible have to say about homosexuality? So here's the big qualifier. The Bible has absolutely nothing to say about homosexuality. And there's a reason that I want to make that plain. Homosexuality, which means a person with a sexual orientation, that's how we talk about it, meaning a natural drive to be attracted to someone of the same sex or to someone of the opposite sex. The whole concept of orientation has been in our language, in our English language, only since about 1945. The point is this: in Greek or in Hebrew or in any of the ancient languages, the word homosexuality does not exist, because the concept that we have today of same-sex relationships and a word for same-sex relationships does not appear in the Scripture. Now notice I said same-sex relationships. And I'm just going to jump in with some general kinds of things, and then we're going to look at, there are 7 verses, 7, that have been used to engage in this conversation. We're going to run out of seats in a hurry. Well, there's some in the back over there. If you're stacking up handouts, and you can pass it, yeah, you just have to grab your own chair. Sorry, I underestimated last week, and I thought this is the number of chairs we needed last week. Now look, there's more this week. That's a good thing. You can put your chair anywhere you want to, but not in this pathway right here, because this is the live stream broadcast. But we are live streaming this, yes. So just pull up a chair anywhere. It's a small room. You can hear and see from anywhere. There are seven times from the Bible, from the beginning to the end, where there is some reference to people of the same sex engaging in sexual intercourse. 7. And I have them all listed for you in your handout here. Now, what I want to say, though, is it's very important. While these verses, you will see, make reference to people of the same sex engaging in sexual intercourse, almost every single one of them to the letter is addressing the oppressiveness of a male involved in abusive relationships expressed in sex to another male. It was, and I wish I could say it was and is gone back into the past and is not now, but that's not true. It was a common practice that when one army conquered another army, the way of humiliation that was exercised, the way that the victorious army would show that it was completely victorious over the other people, was that the males of the army would rape the males of the other army. Because in the Bible, the predominant discussion about sexual intercourse is addressing the overwhelming need in human beings to dominate another human being, to rise above them and push the other human being down. Now, if you think about this, when we're trying to talk about when it's a male raping another male, but also, and you'll see this comes up in the literature, there was a preponderance of activity of successful males in the first century, Roman and Greek males, would show that they had arrived at a certain level of superiority because they would have, first of all, they would have, in addition to their wives, they would have 1 or 2 women who were their slaves, their people who in particular in their lives they could demonstrate their superiority through sex, through sexual behavior, and they had these women that were a part of their life. But more often, they had young boys. Young boys. And I have some resources that I wanted to share with you, but you're going to see that in the scripture, they talk about things that are abomination. They talk about, the word actually is so confused because it's related to sodomy. That Paul is listing the sins of sodomy. There's so much to tell you about this. But the truth is, the translations of the Bible never referred to the activity Paul was listing as sodomy. The older words refer to sex between a grown man and a boy. The Bible condemns it. And the reason the Bible condemns it is because what emerges through the life of Abraham and Sarah and the life of the people of faith is that God is interested in relationships of egalitarianism. God is very interested in seeing to it that human beings do not, as Jesus said to his disciples, lord it over another person. You do not show your prowess as a human being by dominating other people. And man, this is a very hard message for men. It is a very hard message for men. Even in the world we live in today, how do you know a man is a man? Because a man can show you who they dominate. And men express their best innate sense that they are fully men because they are people who are able to dominate others, to control others. And it moves even beyond the workplace. It moves out into our houses. You have a whole branch of Christianity that teaches you that the way a man really knows he's a man in his house is when he is in charge of his woman, his wife, and he is totally in charge of his children. Now, if you've ever walked into any of those houses, you know that that is just not the case. Or, if that male is determined to be in charge, you will find violence. You will find violence. Because human beings are not created to be dominated by other human beings. They are not. In the time that the New Testament was written, in the time of Jesus, it was a regular practice. It was regular practice in Roman society for men of Rome to prefer sex with boys. And when I say boys, I'm talking about boys who are too young to give consent. And these boys would be drawn into the life of a person who wanted you to know how powerful they were, and this was a part of their life. This, Jesus and the early church said, is reprehensible. It is reprehensible. And you know where it was practiced most? It was practiced in the temples of we call the pagan religions. Because so much was this practice of men and boys a part of their life that they had instituted in their religious rituals. So if you weren't powerful enough or wealthy enough to have your own boy, you could go to the temple, and in the temples, there were boys for everybody. And the Apostle Paul, in particular, thinks that this is the epitome of what in the ancient Hebrew times Moses warned about. Moses warned over and over and over again to be careful not to adopt the patterns and practices of the people who are around you in the world. And he did so because he said and believed that God was calling human beings to a different way of life. A way of life that did not mean that in order to show your power and your strength, you had to show how many people were submissive to you. Jesus brings it right to the pinnacle when at the Last Supper, he comes into the Last Supper to demonstrate his power and his strength. And what does he do?
Wash the feet.
He washed the feet of his disciples. And Peter says, no. Now, to me, when Peter says no, this is the voice of males. This is the voice of the male in the Christian tradition. No. No, please don't ask me to give up that. How will I know if I'm really a man? How will I know if I'm really a person of God's full development as a man? Jesus said, well, you serve others as a sign of your manhood. You demonstrate your complete fullness as a male by giving yourself to someone else. Now, if you can't hear how radical the way of Jesus was in the world, I don't blame you. Because we almost cannot go back and hear the striking contrast of Jesus as he is talking, at least in our knowing of them, mostly to men. Mostly to men. He says in later on in the New Testament, it says that in the Christian household, it should be like this. Men, you should love your wives. And you should give up your life for your wife like Jesus gave up his life for the church. It just doesn't compute. It does not compute in a world of male dominance and a world where in everywhere else the idea, the full definition of a man has to do with their power to show you the people that they have under their thumb and the people they have control of. Now let's look, if you have a handout, I probably ran out of handouts again too. Last week I made 15, this week I made 25, and I'm sure they're gone. I do have this electronically, and I'll share it with you electronically so you can look at it. So, I've covered now the first part. I want to talk now about the 7 verses. This one, the first one is Genesis 19, 1 to 14. This is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And in most of the colonial period of time, the formation of the United States, there was a sin called sodomy. The sin of sodomy was named supposedly after the event of Sodom and Gomorrah. The sin of sodomy was male anal sex. So it was outlawed. Why was it outlawed? Because you go to the Bible and you'll see how much God hates male anal sex. You'll see it. Because when God found male anal sex in the city of Sodom, God rained down fire from heaven and destroyed the entire city. There's only one problem with it. The story of Sodom is not about homosexuality. Now, I'm going to say this to you and then say you're going to have to go back and read it and reread it. Let me just read it to you. Genesis 19, 1 to 14. 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down his face to the ground, and he said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet, and then when you rise early and go on your way." This introduces the most important theme of Hebrew spirituality: hospitality. The willingness to take 2 strangers and offer them your home, your bed, your food, everything you have. And Lot is Abraham's brother-in-law. They said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But Lot urged them strongly, so that they turned aside to him, and they entered his house, and he made them a feast, and baked them unleavened bread, and they ate. He did not know them. They were total strangers to him. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." And if you haven't heard this before, knowing someone in the biblical sense means have sexual intercourse with them. Bring them out so that we can rape them. This is the epitome of the opposite of hospitality. If you miss this point, I mean, what's the worst thing you could do to a stranger? Besides kill them. Rape them. And so it's everybody. It's every man, boy, child. The old man is standing out there saying, "We want to destroy these strangers." So, listen to what happens. "Bring them out to us that we may know them." Lot went out the door to the men, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly." Now here is, if there are places in the Bible that don't distress you, then you haven't read it. "Look, I have 2 daughters who are virgins. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they replied, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came here as an alien, and he would play judge." You see, Lot was an immigrant. He was not original citizen of the city of Sodom. So this fellow came here as an alien, and he's going to play the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. And they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near the door to break it down. But the men inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great. so that they were unable to find the door. And then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place." Now, notice, if this was a bunch of men, gay men, looking to have sexual intercourse with men, why would they be asking for daughters? This is not that. This is the way men show that they are dominant over men. I don't know what else to tell you. It's a horrible fact, but I also wish I could tell you that this has stopped in the city of Sodom. If you listen carefully, listen to the wars that are going on today, and listen to what is happening just beyond the sight of the lens of cameras that takes place in various areas where one small army comes in and dominates another area. They rape the women and they rape the men. It's about domination. It's about claiming I am stronger than you. And it is the opposite of hospitality. This is a drama that is part of the entire dialogue of the Bible. This is not some remote story. This is the heart and the soul of the entire witness of the Bible from beginning to end. The human population is hell-bent on putting one person down and another person up. And God, think how amazing this is. That in the New Testament, trying to define who Jesus was, the hymn they used to sing in the first century church was this: Jesus was at the top of the pile. He was God, and he emptied himself of everything that there was to being God. And he came among us. Now here's the oxymoron. He came among us in the most powerful position he could assume. He was born as an infant in a manger, born to a poor woman in Nazareth. This is the heart of the drive of the gospel, is to capture the heart of the domineering, overpowering, need to control pulse that is in the heart of human beings, and to find them there and turn them around and introduce them to a different way of living. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, well, let's see what happens. They were struck with blindness, and then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here, daughters, anyone in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So it turns out that the visitors may have been ambassadors from God, angels, if you will. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, "Get up and get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." And then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. He overthrew those cities and all the plain and the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, you might say, well, you know what? You haven't really convinced me. There's still a lot of talk about men having sex with men here. But if you will at least give a platform to Sodom and Gomorrah like I have given it to you, and then you come to Bible study, you come to Bible study because we're about to get into the prophets, and you will find out that probably 16 or 17 times in the later reference of the Bible, the prophets warn the towns that they are living in to remember the sin of Sodom. And what the prophets are talking about, because what the prophets are almost always talking about is the failure to provide the blessing of God in hospitality. What makes God most angry? is that when a human population, which has been given a sky and air, and been given water in the ground, and been given fruit that grows on trees, and when you plant one grain, 100 grows up and takes its place, that in a life of bounty, that nothing that comes to us as a gift, that we, this are you in your life with blessings you did not earn? What have I done except to bring the sun up in the morning and to let the rain fall? What is it in your hearts, O humans, that have turned you so hard that you take my blessings and use them as a way to lord it over other human beings? This is what the Bible has to say. It's just not talking about homosexuality. It's talking about something much more graphic. All right, the class is short. Questions, comments? Yes?
Do they know where Sodom was archaeologically?
No, I mean, I could pretend that, and they do sometimes pretend. If you look on a map, Sodom will be marked there. But the difficulty is with ancient cities, I don't know, it's hard to imagine, but that, there's coverings over, the cities fall down, they move cities. They just don't really know for sure where any of that is. Because this is an ancient story. All right, let's go on to Judges. The one in Judges is a very similar story. Judges 9, 1-30. While they were enjoying themselves, the men of the city, a perverse lot, surrounded the house and started pounding on the door. They said to the old man, the master of the house, bring out the man who came into your house so that we may have intercourse with him. This is a contemporary translation. What they say is so that we can rape him. And the man of the house went to them and said to them, no, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Since this man is my guest, do not do this vile thing. Here are my brothers and his concubine. Let me bring them out. Ravish them. Look how nice they make that word. Rape. Rape them and do whatever you want to them. But against this man, do not do such a vile thing. But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and put her out to them. This is a horrible, horrible event. As it goes on, if you know the story, this man, in a prophecy of condemnation. By the way, these are the children of Abraham and Sarah here. This is a town of the people of faith that treat this guest this way. Do not act so wickedly. What the man does when he's done, he takes his daughter and he cuts her into 14 or 15 pieces. And he mails each piece of his daughter to each region of the tribes of Israel. He delivers her body. And he does it and basically asks, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? What is wrong that you would treat people, strangers, this way? You are called upon to be the ministers of blessing in the world to strangers. It's your mission. These are horrible. It has nothing to do with homosexuality. Nothing. Comments? you're looking for a disturbing afternoon of reading the Bible, read the rest of that paragraph.
But also, isn't this a statement too of how viewing women versus men? That a male stranger
Yes.
has more value than a female
And your own
daughter.
daughter.
Yes.
Pretty scary.
Yeah, the value, the cultural value of the time, and I would argue that by the time you get to this part, the brokenness, one of the consequences of the broken relationships that we're seeing as coming out of the Garden of Eden is the absolute unfolding of this domination of one person over another, and in particular, male dominance. The belief that a man is not a man unless a man is bossing a woman around. And yes, look how it's such a difficult lesson to teach, because what I want to say is they are trying to tell you how important hospitality is. And I don't think they're trying to say this man didn't value his daughter. I think in a way we may not understand it. He's trying to say this man was trying to teach that the value of the identity of the Hebrew person is so wound up, so bound, rather lose a member of his family than to exercise hostility toward a stranger. Yes?
The only question I have is why, if somebody comes to your door demanding one of your family members or your slaves or concubines demanding sex, why can't you just fend them off? Why do you have to give them somebody? Are they that, you can't defend?
I think it's a mob scene.
Oh, it's
I
more
think the
than,
idea
more than,
is that, no,
probably a
it's-
lot of
Yeah,
people,
it's a mob.
yeah.
These are mobs. These are both angry mobs. Yes.
I think that these two verses from Leviticus are the ones that I've seen most often.
Yeah, we're going to
as
get to
ways
them.
of
Yeah.
condemning
Yeah.
homosexuality.
Yep. So let's go look at that then. So this is number 3 of the 7. Leviticus, one sentence in Leviticus: you shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. And you might as well throw the next one right into it. Leviticus 20. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination, and they shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. Now, the first thing you have to kind of reset, you have to reset your understanding and ask yourself, what is abomination? The claim here, if you've ever read Leviticus, if you've never read Leviticus, you should not start with these 2 verses. You have to get into the mindset of Leviticus to understand what they're talking about here. A couple of things, and you might say, oh yeah, Pastor Lee, you're really good at explaining this all away. It was also an abomination to masturbate. Absolute abomination. And the reason it was an abomination to masturbate was that the belief at the time was that women had nothing to do with procreation, nothing. They were vessels. The womb of a woman was a carrying vessel, and that the child actually issued forth from the man. The ejaculation from the male was the child. They didn't have microscopes. They didn't have the biology that we have. Where does life originate from? It originates in the loins of a man. And then a woman is just supposed to carry it around for 9 months. So when a man ejaculates, what is he doing? He's killing a child.
Yeah.
It's an abomination. And why was it an abomination? Because the greatest threat to any population of people was the failure to procreate. So many children died even after they were born. Child death rate was phenomenal. So you had to take every opportunity you could to have a child. You had to take advantage of every urge that you had to have a child, and you can't have a child one man to another man. So, masturbation is an abomination. And the word abomination means it is a violation of the religious code. Because the religious code in Leviticus, which is being explained, is laying out a whole variety of things which are considered not really good to do in terms of their religious understanding of their calling in life. Men need to have sex with women so they can have babies. At least that's the value. Now, the reason I say you shouldn't build too much of your opinion about homosexuality on Leviticus is because if you go back to Leviticus and read it, you'll see that right after it, it says there's a couple other abominations that are also part of their life. If you are a farmer and you plant one seed in the field and plant another seed in the same field, that is an abomination. That my grandfather started doing this trick in farming, which was you plow the field and then you would plant wheat. But at the same time you plant wheat, you plant an alfalfa seed. Because the wheat will come up and be ripe and harvested by July 4th or July 6th. It's all done. Its lifespan is this long. But the alfalfa will come up underneath the wheat. And so then after the wheat is harvested off, in about a month later you have a fabulous crop of hay for the cows. Leviticus says that's an abomination. It's exactly the same word. There's more. I can't think right now off the top of my head. I think they're listed here. The abominations go on. Yeah, the mixing of kinds was defined as an abomination. The scripture occurs in a section of the code which has its main purpose to set out laws to keep Israel different from surrounding cultures. To keep it different. There are some really, really weird abominations that are listed here. And you can really go into it. And the consequence of every abomination that you commit is death. If you sew a garment and you put two types of you put wool and linen, or wool and another type of material together, it's an abomination and you should be put to death. I mean, it's just, you have to, you can hear, oh, Lou, you're a pastor in 2020 and you are culturally relativizing, you're trying to argue away from what's clear. Really? You have to go deal with this. You have to go to Leviticus and look at what is an abomination. And recognize that we have dismissed all of the things that are called abominations in Leviticus. We don't abide by them. And we don't apologize for abiding by them. I'll guarantee you that my jacket is made up of polyester and something else. And I don't expect to have to run away from someone trying to kill me at the door. Questions, comments?
I just have one question.
Yes.
I think some of these rules might pertain to the times that we just don't. For instance, it's possible that the mixing of materials caused some kind of rash or silly thing, something as simple as that. They were always trying to avoid some kind of problem. The same with the kosher laws. Don't eat this kind of food because it might make you sick. Just as if you wear something, some people were allergic to wool. They didn't understand that, perhaps.
I think if you go, and I challenge you, go read Leviticus. But read it. Don't just read part of it. Read it. And I'm trying to think, who's been with me through Leviticus in my Bible study? I mean, if you're part of the Bible study, and we're reading through Leviticus, we read one chapter at a time. When we get to the end of the chapters in Leviticus, and everybody in the room is like, holy smoke! Like, what is this about? Well, some of the food restrictions, healthy practices. There's just way anything to do with anything to do. The leap I make. My dad's here today, and we're riding around in Amish country, right? Now, if you want to treat and you want to deal with the issues of Leviticus, go ride around in Amish country. Why? Because we're riding down the road, and here comes a tractor. A tractor is coming toward us. And the tractor has an engine that is running in it, and an Amishman is driving the tractor. But they're steel. They're steel. The Amish community's attempt to distinguish. They have said, well, we don't put rubber on tires of our tractors because it is an abomination. That's the best definition of abomination. An abomination is something that allows you to lose the distinguishing mark between you and the pagan cultures around you. Now what's funny is, there are, in the area where my dad and mom live, there are probably 5 or 6 different divisions of Amish. So there are Amish that will not drive tractors because it's an abomination. And then they don't even know, like our conversation was about, how do you pay? How do you decide? And the Amish elders would be, you're focusing on the wrong thing. It's not about how did we decide, it's just that we have it. We have a rule. We have a way. You must distinguish yourself from the people around you because you are called by God for a special way of life. And if you lose the boundary, the distinctions between you and the people around you, you will also lose your mission in life. John.
So all of these things seem to come down to boundary conditions. Every single thing you said, every single another category. There are things. Then one boundary or another seems to be just from start to finish in both the book as well as the practice of many faiths, that Hindu and you just name them. And so all of these things are human, and the issue of boundaries, we focus on them, but they're all pretty ill-defined, and you can make up your rules as you go along. It seems to me that this is a lot of the pain and suffering that's caused is because of the arbitrariness of the boundaries that one person can take, and because of power, the boundary condition that we all have to abide by. That seems to be the
and I think I just can't believe the time is gone already. Because anticipating the time would be gone, I wrote a paragraph to continually tie this back to the issue of homosexuality and the attitude of the church to homosexuality. Read it. Just read that. This thing about what this paragraph says is that you must admit that Christians have always looked back and said to what had been interpreted of things to say, we can't do that anymore. We can't do that anymore. First taught and executed, carried out as a mandate for more than 100 years. Go back and read the justifications they had. Go back and look at how they had built up, quote, a biblical attitude towards slavery. And they had chapters and verses, they're in here in my paragraph, that justified it. And what I want to say to you is, you can't do that. Stop doing that to the Bible. Stop doing it. We are not going to do it. We're not going to have slaves. We are not going to do this anymore. And it's also now what I think has really come full center. I don't think we have really worked out the issue that God is not against African American people with dark skin. This whole idea that God has a different attitude towards people who have black skin than God does toward people who have white skin is a deeply rooted cultural prejudice. So is the prejudice against same-sex oriented people. But you cannot, not with me in the room, you cannot go to the Bible and justify prejudicial attitudes towards people of darker skin. More than half of the people named in the Bible were black. Look where they came from. They came out of Antioch and out of Egypt. Those are black, darker than African Americans in the South. You cannot justify it. And then, of course, the other great topic is the church's attitudes towards women. When you look at it, I believe that you will find that what the church said was the Bible's attitude toward women was actually a construct that came out of an overwhelming prejudice growing out of male domination towards women. And when you look at what the Bible teaches, you'll find that the Bible sees that as, I'm not going to call it an abomination, I'm going to call it as an anathema. It's the totally opposite of the church. I'm going to end with this story. And the Evangelical Presbyterian Church was a division of the Presbyterians, and it started over a war of how we do communion. Because we do communion by intinction, and when it was suggested that Presbyterians should do communion by intinction, the entire denomination divided. It divided. Seminaries were formed, everything. We are not going to do it that way because doing communion by intinction is an abomination. They had all kinds of justifications for it, all kinds of deep theological arguments to show why you had to do it the way we've done it. Which is interesting because they used to have the little cups. They would pour the little cups out. There is an insanity to when human beings get on this rail. There's an insanity to it because there were no little cups in Jesus' time. There were none. But that was the way God intended for us to do communion, and if you're not going to do it that way, we're dividing. And off they went, formed their whole. Now, I was alive at the time when Presbyterians hold general assemblies where all the Presbyterians get together. And so the history of the communion issue that created this new denomination had become unknown to the new denomination. And so here was the surprising thing. 3 years ago, at the annual convention of the new denomination of this Presbyterian church, they got together and somebody said, you know, I'm thinking it'd be a lot more convenient for us to do communion by intinction. At the annual gathering of the denomination that was invented to get rid of intinction, they celebrated the communion by intinction. And the only people who knew were the really old people who had fought the fight. We can be crazy about this kind of thing. I gotta go. You gotta go.
You want, you can have it. No, you sure you don't?
Thank you for your
No, I
attention.
will ask Chris.
Please read this. You'll see more of what I really wanted to say.
Can I ask Chris for a copy on Tuesday? No, you don't have to give you yours.
No, I have.
Oh, you have two? We had like half of them, that's all right. We have- we're good. I have kept
Next week.
a folder on these, and there's a reason, okay?
I did, I actually put them in my album.
I have a folder for these because I also have people that ask me questions. And it's helpful if he's giving us some information that I feel the same way. Because I know, one time I used to do it.